Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight, you're not a Roman citizen. You're not a senator, a general, or even a foot soldier. You're a slave, one of the millions, nameless, shirtless, and slowly dying under the weight of someone else's empire. You didn't sign up for this. You were taken, shackled, sold, and now your job is to keep someone else's marble floor clean enough for their pet monkey to walk on. You'll be beaten, branded, starved, and used. But don't worry, it won't be forever. Just until your body gives out. Before your master calls for more wine and remembers he hasn't punished anyone today, do me a small favour. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is. I always love to know who's tuning in from around the world. And if you'd like early access to more slow, grim bedtime stories, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find the Patreon link in the description. But for now, lie back, close your eyes, and try not to think too hard about the chains. Let's begin. You were free once, not rich, not important, but free. You had land, or at least access to it. A hut made from sticks and mud, maybe. A few goats that smelled like hell but listened better than your cousins. You knew the names of the stars and how to tell if a storm was coming by the twitch of a tree branch. You knew which plants fed you and which ones killed you slowly. And that was enough. You weren't special, but you belonged to yourself. Then the world changed, without asking first. The Romans came, not in a dramatic thunder of hooves or with trumpets blaring. Just a group of men in matching sandals and blood on their spears, walking like they owned the place. Because they did. They didn't call it a raid, they called it pacification, which is a long Latin word that means you don't matter anymore. You watched your village disappear in minutes, screaming, smoke, a child trampled in the chaos, the goats bolted. You didn't get to say goodbye to anyone, not even yourself. Capture is less dramatic than the stories say. There's no heroic stand, no glorious resistance. You're not a soldier. You're just a person who was asleep when the wrong men kicked your door in. You tried to run. You really did. But hunger makes you slow, and fear makes you stupid. They caught you in the woods, barefoot, breathless, bleeding. You weren't worth killing. Not yet. You had strong arms, decent teeth, and both your eyes. That made you valuable. So they tied your hands and marched you south. The walk took days, maybe weeks. You stopped counting after the first few nights, when your feet stopped hurting and just went numb. They didn't feed you much. A handful of grain, a sip of dirty water. You learned to drink rain from the edge of your shirt. You slept in the mud, or not at all. Some of the others didn't make it. One collapsed and didn't get back up. Another tried to run and had his heel sliced open with a dull blade. No one helped him walk after that. You did your best not to learn their names. You knew where this was going. Eventually, you arrived, not at home because that's gone, but at the place where your life ends and someone else's wealth begins. A Roman port city. Bright marble, expensive stink. There are ships here, and markets, and temples that gleam like gold teeth. But you don't see any of that. You see a cage, dozens of bodies packed into it. You see a man in a toga checking your fingers, like he's choosing fruit. You hear a language you don't understand, but you catch the rhythm. It's the sound of profit. You are not a person now. You are inventory. They strip you again. You stopped caring about modesty days ago, but it still burns when they laugh at you. When they point, when they prod. One Roman merchant lifts your lip like you're a horse. Another clucks at your skin tone like it's a defect. You're washed in cold water and oil, not for your comfort, but to make your muscles shine better under the sun. They smear chalk on your feet and hang a sign around your neck listing your qualities. Healthy, obedient, unbroken. They leave out the truth that you used to have a name, that you used to have a mother, that you once thought the world would let you grow old. The worst part isn't the pain. It isn't the hunger or the fear or the exhaustion. It's how quickly you start to forget. You forget the way your father's voice sounded. You forget the name of the hill you used to climb in spring. You forget your own language, not all at once, but word by word, like teeth falling out. You start thinking in fragments, in commands, in yes and no, in don't flinch when they touch you, in keep your eyes down, in don't cry. Don't cry, don't cry. You begin to understand your new place, not through words, but through silence. The silence of the shackles, the silence of the dead, the silence in your head where something used to live. You are being erased slowly, carefully, professionally by people who invented concrete and crucifixion and will outlive you by centuries. You never had a chance. And that's the joke. That's the dark, rotting punchline. You weren't stolen because you were dangerous. You weren't captured because you were defiant or rebellious or brave. You were taken because you were there. Because someone had a quota. Because Rome needed more hands to hold up its illusion of civilization. It needed someone to scrub the vomitorium, to carry amphorae, to get whipped when the stew was cold. And it got you. There's no going back. There never was. You're not a war prisoner. You're not a victim of injustice. You're not anything now, except useful. And in Rome, useful means you get to live just long enough to suffer properly. You don't walk to the auction. You're herded, like livestock, like a particularly uncooperative flock of goats. Except goats don't usually get poked in the kidneys with a spear when they stumble. The sun is already high when you arrive at the open square. Not the good part of the city, not the gleaming marble forums you saw from the road, but the part tucked behind the bakeries and bathhouses, the part that smells like old meat and desperation. There's a wooden platform there, and a crowd. That's when it hits you. This is where they sell things. This is where they sell you. They strip you again, even though you were already naked. Apparently, you weren't naked enough. They want you slick, presentable, so they slather your skin in oil to make your muscles stand out, to make you shine like a polished statue. You're not special. Every slave on the block gets the same treatment. The fat ones, the strong ones, the children, the terrified teenagers trying not to cry. Everyone is cleaned up, rubbed down, and lined up like produce at a market stall. You're told to stand straight. If you slouch, they hit you. If you look tired, they threaten you. If you speak, they laugh. The buyers start arriving. Wealthy men in expensive sandals. Their wives wearing jewelry heavier than your entire past. Scribes with wax tablets, recording details like you're an entry in a warehouse inventory. They circle slowly, casually, as if they're here to select a dinner wine. One of them stops in front of you. He tugs your ear. Not gently. He lifts your lip and squints at your teeth. One is chipped, not bad, but enough to make him raise an eyebrow. Another buyer prods at your shoulder, checking for muscle tone. You're trying not to shake, not from fear. You've already burned through fear, just from exhaustion. They ask questions, not to you, about you. One of the handlers answers. Male, 18, no injuries. Speaks a little Latin. Good for domestic work. Can carry loads. No known illnesses. It's all lies, of course. You're 21. You don't speak Latin. You coughed up blood this morning. But truth is bad for business. You're not a person anymore. You're a listing. And listings are supposed to be clean, quiet and ready to serve. Next comes the demonstration. The slave dealer calls you forward. You don't hesitate. You've learned. He makes you lift your arms, turn around, squat, open your mouth. He points at the calluses on your palms like they're a selling point. Then he slaps your thigh and says something that makes the crowd chuckle. You don't know the words, but you recognize the tone. The joke is about your body, about what it's good for, about how many hours it can be pushed before breaking. When the bidding starts, it doesn't feel real. Numbers are shouted, hands are raised. You try to follow, but the words blur together. It's not exciting, not fast-paced. It's business. Cold, practiced, and thoroughly boring to everyone except you. You're finally sold to a man you never saw coming. Tall, plain-faced, with sunburnt hands and a tunic that looks too clean for real labour. He nods once, drops a coin pouch into the dealer's hands, and walks away without looking at you again. You don't know his name. You don't know where he's taking you. All you know is that you're worth slightly less than a mule and slightly more than a nice amphora of wine. If you're lucky, and that's a word you've already started to hate, you'll be sent to a household, a domus, a villa, somewhere with walls and order and maybe enough bread to keep your ribs from showing. You'll wait on children, sweep courtyards, empty chamber pots, and try to remember which members of the family are allowed to hit you without consequences. You'll sleep on a blanket by the kitchen fire and hope no one notices you when they're drunk. But if you're not lucky, if your new owner has other plans, you'll be sent to the countryside, to a latifundium, a massive agricultural estate where slaves are worked to death in the olive groves and vineyards. There you'll be one of hundreds, maybe thousands. No one will learn your name. No one will care if you collapse. The overseer carries a whip. He uses it. The food is bad. The hours are worse. And the only rest you get is the brief moment between fainting and being kicked awake again. And if you're truly unlucky, if the gods really hate you, or if your price was just a little too low, you'll be chained and shipped to the mines. The ones in Hispania, or Sardinia, or Sicily. It doesn't matter where. Once you're in the mines, you stop existing. You become a shadow in the dark. You hammer at stone, hour after hour, until your hands split open and your lungs fill with dust. You don't last long there. No one does. But you last just long enough to be replaced. The auction ends. They don't trust you. That's not paranoia. That's policy. You're a slave now, and slaves run. It's the only freedom left. The kind you steal in the middle of the night, with nothing but blisters and blind hope. The Romans know this, so they solve it the Roman way, with fire. You're marched chained to the edge of the estate, or into a small side room that smells like scorched hair and iron. No one explains what's about to happen. They assume you already know. You do. There's a brazier in the corner. The coals glow red, slow and lazy, like they're in no hurry to destroy you. A set of metal brands rest nearby. Letters mostly, simple ones. A few are worn smooth from overuse. One of the handlers picks one up with a pair of tongs. He doesn't make eye contact. He doesn't need to. He's done this before. Enough times that it doesn't register anymore. You watch the iron sink into the fire, and for a moment you catch your reflection in the polished surface before the heat takes hold and the metal turns the colour of blood. You're forced to your knees, not because it's easier, just because it's humiliating. They pull your tunic down or off, depending on where they want the brand placed. Shoulder, thigh, forehead, if they really want to make a point. Your skin twitches as the heat gets closer. No one restrains you. They expect you to flinch. They want you to. It makes it easier to mock you afterward. You bite your tongue. You don't scream. Not because you're brave. That concept doesn't apply to you anymore. But because screaming won't help. And it might earn you a second mark. The iron touches you. It's not a sting. It's a scream without sound. Your skin splits under the heat. Bubbles, dies. The pain is bright and simple and total. You smell yourself cooking. Somewhere, deep in your brain, something recognizes it as meat. For a few seconds you don't exist. There's just pain and the wet slap of your body hitting the dirt when they let go. You try to breathe, but your body isn't sure what counts as urgent anymore. Eventually the fire stops, but the pain doesn't. Some slaves are branded with a name, usually initials, like TM for Titius Maximus, your new owner. Others get labels, FUG if they've tried to run, C for clandestinus if they were caught stealing. These aren't warnings, they're advertisements. They say, this one's broken, this one bites, this one's not worth the risk. It's a mark of shame, yes, but more than that, it's a reminder. To you, to them, to everyone who sees you. You're not a man or a woman, you're not even a tool, your inventory. An inventory is marked. The wound doesn't heal clean. Infection is common. There's no salve, no bandage, no mercy. You're expected to work through the pain. In the fields, in the kitchen, wherever they put you. If the burn festers, that's your fault. If it slows you down, that's another whipping. You can't sleep on that side for weeks. You can't move without tearing it. Eventually, it scabs, scars, and settles into the texture of your life, like everything else. You don't look at it. You can't. But you feel it every time someone stares a little too long, every time another slave glances at you, then looks away. The branding isn't just physical, it's psychological. It changes the way you carry yourself, the way you speak. You stop referring to your body as yours. You start to understand that your skin, your name, even your pain, none of it belongs to you anymore. It's on loan. And loans can be recalled without notice. You hear others joke about it, dryly, bitterly. At least they spelled it right. Could have been the face, but the humour is a scab too, thick and ugly and barely holding things in. Some slaves are lucky, if that word can still be used, and escape the brand. House slaves, born into service, those considered less likely to run. But even then, collars exist, tattoos, tags on chains. One way or another, you're marked. If not on the skin, then in the eyes. They look at you like property because you are. And once that idea settles into a Roman's mind, no amount of virtue or pleading can undo it. A slave who walks like a freeman gets noticed. And that never ends well. You used to have marks that meant something else. A scar from climbing trees, a birthmark near your hip, the scratch on your forearm from wrestling your cousin in the woods before the legions came. Those marks are still there, buried under grime and callous and pain. But they don't matter now. The brand matters. The brand tells your story. And that story is short. You belong to someone else now. No prayers were said when the iron touched you. No rites, no witnesses, aside from the ones who laughed. In another life, a man might be remembered for his deeds, a woman for her wisdom. But you'll be remembered by a letter seared into your flesh. If anyone bothers to remember you at all, they like to say there's a difference. House slave, field slave, like you've won something if you end up under a roof. Like carrying wine for a senator's wife is somehow more dignified than hauling sacks of grain until your spine compresses. But once you're inside the system, you learn quickly. The difference is only skin deep. Suffering comes in flavours, not categories. Some are sweetened with cushions and perfume. Others are baked under the sun until they crack. Either way, you rot from the inside. If you're assigned to the fields, it's simple. Brutal, but simple. You wake before the sun, shovel in your hands before the birds finish singing. The work is hard, endless, and mostly involves your back. Planting, pruning, cutting, hauling. You sweat until your clothes cling like wet parchment. You keep moving until your legs don't feel like yours anymore. The overseer watches constantly. He doesn't need to shout. The whip does the talking. If you stop, you get reminded. If you limp, you get punished. If you collapse, you get stepped over. There's always someone more desperate to take your place. The food is worse in the fields. Bread so dry it could double as roof tile. Olives if they're half rotted and crawling with flies. Water that smells like it's already passed through something alive. You eat because it stops the dizziness, not because it helps. You sleep on the floor of a shared hut, too crowded for anyone to stretch. The air inside smells like feet, mildew, and quiet despair. No one speaks much. There's nothing to say. You wake up sore, go to sleep sore, and dream of nothing. Hope doesn't last long out here. It's too soft for this soil. But house slaves? You're told they have it easier. And maybe that's true if you enjoy being groped by every guest who's had too much wine. Maybe it's easier to polish silverware for a man who calls you by the wrong name, then blames you for his own drunkenness. House slaves don't die as fast, sure, but that doesn't mean they live. You become furniture, movable, breakable, forgettable. You walk quietly, Stand still when ordered, smile on command. You learn every crack in the tile and every creak of the floorboard so you can avoid them. You don't exist unless someone needs you. And then you exist too much. Your master's children think you're a toy. They play games with your hair. They tie things to your belt. They ask if you sleep standing up. When you answer, too slowly or too honestly, they pout and run to their father, who reminds you that disobedience is a crime. You weren't disobedient, of course, but the line between guilt and innocence is so thin, it disappears the moment a Roman gets bored. You get slapped or whipped or sent outside to toughen up. You learn to nod. You learn to say yes, Domina. You learn to never look anyone in the eye for more than half a second. There's more food in the house, but it's not for you. You see it, smell it, serve it. Roast pork, honey cakes, imported garum. You carry plates heavy with meat to the table and then scrape the bones into the fire when they're done. If you're lucky, you get the scraps before the dogs do. If you're unlucky, they throw it at you for fun. Either way, you're the one who sweeps up afterward. You get good at swallowing envy. It tastes better than nothing. The walls are made of marble, the floors mosaic, the ceilings painted with gods you don't believe in. But none of that means anything when you're scrubbing piss off the atrium tiles at midnight. The same guests who compliment the artwork spit in your direction when they leave. The same hand that pats your head one day might strike you the next, just to see if you bruise. There's no logic to it, only status, only power, only the quiet understanding that you are here to make someone else feel important. Sometimes you envy the field slaves. At least their suffering makes sense. Pain when you work, rest when you don't. In the house, your punishment comes wrapped in civility, in polite phrases and slow smirks. Your soul dies by degrees, not by lashes. And when you scream, if you scream, the walls echo it back in perfect silence. You might dream of being reassigned, of switching roles. But the truth is there's nowhere to go. No position that doesn't hurt. No corner of the villa, or the estate, or the empire where you're safe from humiliation. The system doesn't care what you do, only that you do it without complaint. Field slave or house slave, male or female, strong or frail, the only thing that matters is obedience. Everything else is scenery. So when someone asks if you're lucky to work indoors, you don't answer. You just nod. Because the only thing worse than being a slave is being a slave who complains. And because deep down, you know the truth. The house is just another kind of prison. It smells better, sure, but rot is still rot. It just takes longer to notice. The Romans don't eat like normal people. They feast, gorge, devour. Meals aren't just for nourishment, they're performances. Political theatre on a silver platter. And your job is to keep the show running. You carry trays, pour wine, wipe up spills before anyone notices. You move silently, efficiently, invisibly. Because if they see you, they might remember that you exist. And that never ends well. It starts early, bread in the morning, baked before sunrise, and you're the one stoking the oven, while the others are still shivering in the dark. You're up before the family and asleep long after the last lamp's been extinguished. You're not just a servant, you're infrastructure. When they ask for figs, you find figs. When they want wine, you know the difference between Falernian and the cheap local vinegar that burns going down. When a guest drops a platter, you're already halfway across the room with a cloth before it hits the ground. You're never invited to eat, of course. You serve, you smile, you nod. You hold your breath when they complain that the fish is too warm or the sauce too thick. You don't taste anything you carry, unless someone's suspicious of poison, in which case you'll be asked to try it first. That's not an honour, that's a test. If you collapse, at least the senator's reputation stays intact. If you don't, well, congratulations, the olives are probably safe. The meals go on for hours. Reclining nobles draped in silk toss food into their mouths while discussing who should be exiled next. Their fingers drip with oil and honey. They laugh with their mouths full. Their dogs bark under the table, snarling over scraps, and you're the one who breaks them apart when the growling starts. If a guest spills wine on their tunic, you blot it dry. If they vomit, and they will eventually, you clean it before the next course arrives. You're stationed near the door, not because anyone cares about your comfort, but because it's convenient to have you close when the wine starts coming back up. The stench is constant. Wine, bile, meat, sweat, perfume, all layered together until you stop noticing. You get good at ignoring smells. You get better at pretending you don't hear the things they say. They talk about conquests while chewing lamb. They insult you between sips. They speculate about whether your people have souls or just instincts. You keep pouring. You keep bowing. You keep quiet. They aren't asking for opinions. They're barely aware you breathe. Sometimes if the guests are drunk enough and generous enough, or just bored, they'll throw scraps your way. Not offer, throw. Bits of bread, a strip of meat, a half-chewed fig. It's a game to them. See if the slave can catch it. See if they beg. You learn to catch without blinking. You learn not to look grateful. If you thank them, they'll do it again. If you frown, they'll stop. You don't want either. You just want to get through the night without being slapped or tripped or set on by the dogs again. You sleep in the hallway between the kitchen and the main atrium. No bed. Just a worn mat tucked beside a wall with a leaky pipe that drips cold water onto your arm if you turn the wrong way. You sleep lightly because someone is always calling for something. More wine, more food, more firewood, and you can't be the one who doesn't answer fast enough. You've seen what happens when another slave is slow. You don't want to see it again. The cook hates you, or maybe he doesn't. Maybe he just hates everything. He shouts constantly, waves knives in the air, mutters about undercooked dormice and imported spices gone stale. But he knows his job, and so do you. You know when to stay close, when to vanish, when to keep your head down and just scrub the soot from the pots until your fingers bleed. You're not even the lowest in the kitchen. That honour goes to the child tasked with plucking feathers from dead birds. But you're not far from the bottom either. There's always someone worse off. That's supposed to be comforting. It isn't. Sometimes you're loaned out for parties, big ones, dozens of guests, hundreds of dishes, days of preparation. You're part of the decoration, a moving statue with a wine jug. People touch you, poke you, ask how much you cost. You're not supposed to answer. You just pour, nod, smile. Once someone called you the quiet one with the decent posture. It wasn't meant as a compliment. It was just something they said while deciding whether to throw a date at your face. You know the schedule now, the cycles, the seasons of gluttony. You know when the fish arrives, when the bread spoils, when the wine starts to taste sour. You know the difference between a pat on the back and the wind-up before a slap. You know not to talk unless spoken to. You know not to eat unless someone's watching. And you know how to move through a room like a ghost, quiet, swift, and half alive. You exist to feed people who never stop eating. They gorge while you starve. They laugh while you clean up after their waste. You keep them alive, satisfied, comfortable. They don't know your name. And if they did, they wouldn't use it. You will be beaten. Not maybe, not eventually. You will be beaten. It's not a punishment in the sense you once understood it. A response to something wrong. It's a ritual. A reminder. A way for them to hear the thud of control hitting flesh. Sometimes it's because you dropped a jug. Sometimes it's because someone else did. Sometimes it's because your master had a bad dream or a bad lunch and needed to take it out on something soft. You happen to be soft. The first time it catches you off guard. You're not ready. You don't know how to move, how to flinch, how to brace. It's the surprise that hurts most, not the pain itself, but the fact that it's yours now, part of you. The blow lands, then another. The world goes white around the edges, and your breath disappears like it was stolen. You don't even think to scream. That comes later, when you realise this is just the beginning. You will be hurt again, and again, and again. There are tools for this. The rod, of course, a long stick used for general correction. The flagrum, a short whip with knotted cords that can open skin like overripe fruit. The ferula, a leather strap for more refined households who don't want bloodstains on the mosaic. And then there are the improvisations, spoons, broom handles, belt buckles, sandals, whatever's within reach. Pain is an art form in Rome, and you're the canvas. You learn fast. Not because you're clever, but because you have to. You learn how to curl your body to protect your kidneys, how to twist slightly at the last moment so the blow hits muscle instead of bone, how to keep your face calm while your body screams. You even learn how to scream strategically, just loud enough to sound properly repentant, but not so loud as to seem dramatic. No one likes a dramatic slave. Sometimes the beatings come with speeches, long, rambling lectures about obedience and virtue and Roman discipline. Your master talks while you bleed. You're expected to nod between strikes, to mumble agreement through broken lips. These aren't just punishments, they're performances. You're the prop. The audience is whoever's standing nearby, watching with a mixture of boredom and casual interest. If you're lucky, they look away. If you're unlucky, they offer suggestions. There's no appeal, no defense. You're not on trial. You're an object malfunctioning. If you cry too much, you're weak. If you don't cry enough, you're defiant. The line between proper submission and troublesome attitude moves constantly. You stumble across it often. Every slave does. The beatings are supposed to prevent rebellion. In reality, they just make you quieter, slower, smaller inside. You see it happen to others, friends, strangers, children. You see a boy whipped for spilling soup, 6 lashes, bare back, ribs visible with every strike. You see a girl hit for looking too long at a guest. She didn't understand the language yet. She thought he was asking a question. They say she cried for 3 days after. Then she stopped, completely. You wonder which is worse, the pain or the numbness that comes after it. Some masters prefer public punishment, a courtyard spectacle, a reminder to the rest of you. Others are more private about it, which somehow feels worse. There's something about a quiet beating that makes it linger longer in your head. The sound of breath, the sharp intake after the first hit, the way footsteps echo in a stone room while you're trying not to scream. You start associating silence with danger. Every pause in conversation feels like a countdown. Not all pain comes from anger. Some of it is methodical, calculated, correction for posture, for speed, for pronunciation. You're taught how to walk with a book balanced on your head, and if it falls, you're struck. You're taught to serve wine without spilling a drop, and if you falter, you're struck. The training is relentless. The message is simple. You are moldable, and if you break under pressure, that just means you are defective to begin with. In time, your body becomes a map of these lessons. Bruises bloom and fade like sickly flowers. Welts crust over. Scars form. You learn to hide them when guests are present. No one likes to be reminded where their comfort comes from. You carry the memory of each strike long after the mark disappears. Some fade completely, others stay forever. Not on your skin, but in your movements. The way you flinch when someone raises a hand too quickly. The way your breath catches when someone shouts your name. They say Rome is built on discipline. That order must be maintained. That slaves need correction, or they forget their place. But you've never forgotten. You know your place. It's the one on the floor, curled around your ribs, trying not to vomit from the pain. It's the one in the kitchen, pretending not to wince when your bruises rub against your tunic. It's the one at the bottom of every list, behind the oxen and the cutlery. Pain is your instructor now. It teaches you obedience, caution, silence. It teaches you to survive, but it never teaches you dignity. That was taken long before the rod touched your back. There are no questions in this part of your life. No one asks what you like, what you need, or what you fear. Desire is a luxury for the free. Consent is a concept reserved for citizens. You are not a person anymore. You are property. And property doesn't get a choice. It doesn't start with violence, not exactly. It starts with proximity. You serve wine in the triclinium, and someone's hand lingers when they take the cup. You're bathing your master's children, and he walks in and doesn't leave. You're called to your mistress's quarters at night, and she says nothing about why. Just gestures to the bed and turns away like it's a chore, like she's setting a brush on a table and expecting it to stay there until morning. There are rules, of course, rules for how slaves should behave in bed. You follow them, or you suffer more than usual. Be still. Be quiet. Don't cry, unless they like it when you cry. Smile if they want that. Don't smile if they don't. Your job isn't to enjoy it. Your job is to not make it worse. There's no safety in beauty, no protection in youth. If anything, the opposite. If you're ugly or broken, they might ignore you. If you're handsome or soft-skinned, you get noticed. And once you're noticed, you never get left alone again. Sometimes it's transactional. A guest makes a comment about your face. Your master smiles and says, "You can have them for the night." It's treated like hospitality, the same way they'd offer wine or figs. You're just another amenity. The guest doesn't bother to remember your name, if they ever knew it. They might tip your owner in the morning, or they might not. Either way, you're the one who has to clean yourself in the dark, alone before sunrise, and be back to work before anyone notices you limping. Other times it's about punishment. If you displease your master, they might send you to one of the older guards, or to the kitchen boys, or to whoever's owed a favour. Use them, they'll say, and they will. Not because they want to, always, but because they can. It's a demonstration, a lesson in obedience, played out with your body as the message. You don't resist. Resisting doesn't end it faster. It only makes them rougher, louder, more inventive. If you're born into slavery, the line is even blurrier. Your body doesn't belong to you from the moment you open your eyes. Your parents are probably too afraid to stop what's coming. They've learned how useless that is. They teach you early. How to move, how to respond, how to avoid drawing the wrong kind of attention. Some succeed, most don't. You hear stories of girls sent to brothels before they bled for the first time. Of boys sold to satisfy some senator's idea of exotic pleasure. The market is always hungry. There are roles, of course. Concubina, delicatus, pur, fancy Latin titles that make it sound official, respectable even. But it's all the same. You're there to be touched, to be used, to be claimed. If you become a favourite, they might give you better clothes, perfumed oil, a necklace you're not allowed to remove. But it's not affection, it's ownership, polished to a shine. No one loves their status symbol. They display it, flaunt it, and when it dulls, they replace it. Pregnancy is never good news. If you're the one carrying the child, it means pain, risk, and a future you don't control. The baby will belong to your master, another asset in the household ledger. If you're the one who got someone pregnant, you're disposable. The girl might be punished, you might be separated, the child might be taken from her at birth, or worse, left with her and expected to start working as soon as it can walk. There's no happy ending in these situations, only more mouths to feed and more chains to tighten. Some slaves try to find comfort with each other. Quiet, stolen moments behind the garden wall. A hand on a shoulder, a whispered joke, something small and human in a life designed to grind the softness out of you. But even that carries risk. If you're caught, it's fornication. If you're favoured by someone important, it's betrayal. You learn to love quietly, if at all. You learn not to hope. That's the most dangerous emotion of all. Eventually, you stop thinking of your body as yours. It's easier that way. You treat it like a tool, a thing that moves, obeys, recovers when it's allowed. You clean it, clothe it, use it as directed. You stop flinching. You stop asking why. You stop imagining a life where someone might care whether you said yes or no. No one asks what you want. No one cares. Your body is a convenience, a commodity, a symbol of someone else's power. If you're beautiful, you suffer longer. If you're not, you still suffer, just with less attention. Either way, you're still a slave. You're a public slave now. That doesn't mean you're free. It just means the state owns you instead of a person, which, somehow, manages to feel even worse. There's no master to please, no household hierarchy to navigate, just the endless, impersonal grind of the city itself. You serve not a family, but the machine of Rome, and like every other cog, you're expected to move quietly, efficiently, and without ever breaking. You're assigned to the latrines first. It's not the worst job in theory, at least it's shaded, but theory doesn't cover the smell. It seeps into your skin, your clothes, your teeth. You carry buckets of night soil through streets packed with citizens who pretend not to see you. You empty them into pits that bubble like angry soup. You scrub the stone benches and refill the sponge buckets. You wipe down the marble so the nobleman's thighs don't have to touch filth. Only you do. Always you. The streets are crowded always. People pushing past, shouting, laughing, bartering. But no one looks you in the eye. Not unless they're giving orders, or complaints, or kicking over your water pail because it splashed their sandals. You're told to keep the latrine clean, but no one's ever thanked you. No one's even acknowledged you, unless something went wrong. That's your job now. Make sure the city's waste disappears before the citizens have to notice it exists. Eventually, you're reassigned to the baths. Cleaner? Yes, but only on the surface. There's a different kind of filth here. Oil, sweat, pride. You heat the water, carry the wood, scrub the walls. You learn to fold towels properly, to refill the perfume jars, to drain the pools just fast enough that no one slips. When someone does slip, it's your fault, of course. Everything is. You polish the floors so well, you can see your reflection in them, but you don't recognize the face that stares back anymore. The bathers treat you like part of the structure. They call for soap like it should appear in your hand already. They complain that the towels are too rough, the water too cold, the sandals too worn. They flirt with each other, gossip about politics, brag about who they're having whipped this week. You hear every word. You're supposed to pretend you don't. You learn to keep your eyes down and your ears open, just enough to avoid punishment, not enough to remember anything incriminating. Sometimes you're sent to the temples, not to pray, to clean. You sweep out the dust from between the pillars. You polish the gold on the statues. You change the oil in the lamps so the gods don't have to see their faces in flickering shadows. You don't belong in the rituals, but you're always nearby, mopping blood after animal sacrifices, chasing off rats from the storage rooms, carrying baskets of offerings out the back once the priests decide the gods have had their fill. People pass by you every day. Senators, merchants, freedmen, foreign visitors. You brush shoulders with them, share the same air, feel their gaze pass right through you. You're seen by everyone and remembered by no one. That's the design. Your whole job is to vanish in plain sight, to make things work without making a sound. You are the hands that keep the empire clean, but no one wants to know where the hands came from. Even other slaves look down on you sometimes. The ones in households think they're better off, and maybe they are. At least they get names shouted at them. At least they know who to fear. You fear everyone. The state, the priests, the guards, the drunk men who use you as a landmark on the way home. You don't belong to anyone, so you belong to everyone. That means no one protects you. You're useful, not valuable. The irony is you probably know more about Rome than anyone else. You've seen it from beneath, the drainage, the rituals, the sewage, the gossip. You know who visits which bathhouse, who bribes which priest, who sneaks out of which alley with their tunic misbuttoned. You've seen senators with wine on their breath in the morning and temple girls with coins hidden in their sandals. You know which statues are hollow and which gods get the best cuts of meat. You know which noblemen curse when they think no one's listening. But none of it matters. Your knowledge is worthless. You can't write. You can't speak out. You can't even whisper. without risking a lash. Sometimes you wonder what it would feel like to shout in the middle of the forum. Just one long furious noise, to make them all stop and look. But you won't. You can't. You're a public slave. That means you serve the convenience of the masses. And convenience only works when it's quiet, when it never asks for anything, when it never becomes a person. So you carry the buckets, you scrub the marble, you bow in the presence of people who leave more dirt behind than you clean. You keep the city beautiful, not for yourself, but for the ones who walk past without seeing you. You do your job well, and when you disappear, someone else will take your place without hesitation. Rome will go on shining, and you'll still be invisible, even after you're gone. You didn't think things could get worse. After all, you've cleaned vomit out of marble tiles. You've been groped by drunken senators and treated like air by everyone else. You've scraped human waste from public latrines, carried buckets of ash from temple fires, and folded towels for men who couldn't remember your name. You thought you had seen the bottom. And then they sent you to the mines, because sometimes a slave dies or collapses or simply vanishes in the dark, and someone has to fill the space they left behind. That someone, this time, is you. They don't give you a reason. They don't need to. One morning you're handed off to a guard with a cart and a cold piece of bread. By nightfall, you're chained to a wagon full of other slaves, with faces like closed doors. You travel for days deeper into the countryside, until the trees start to vanish and the hills crack open to reveal what's underneath. Not treasure, not glory, just holes in the earth big enough to swallow people whole. The entrance to the mine is nothing more than a pit surrounded by shacks and smoke. It smells like metal and sweat and something older than rot. You're marched inside without ceremony. The air changes immediately. It's damp, gritty, thick with the weight of everything buried down here. Not just stone, but memory, bone, silence. Torches line the walls, but they're spaced too far apart. The dark creeps in between them, like mould. They chain you in pairs. That way, if one of you tries to escape or dies suddenly, the other has to drag the body until someone comes to replace it. You're given a pick, a chisel, and a scrap of fabric that barely passes for a tunic. No shoes. The floors are uneven, cut with ridges from old collapses. You start coughing the first hour. You don't stop. Your job is to break rocks. That's it. Just strike, lift, carry, over and over. The ore doesn't care how tired you are. The overseers don't either. They don't bark orders unless someone stops moving. Then they don't speak. They strike. You're corrected with clubs, not words. Encouragement comes in the form of not being noticed. Praise is the absence of injury. You sleep in a hollow carved into the wall of the upper shaft. No blankets, just rock, and the heat of other bodies curled beside you. Some nights, there are groans, the long, low kind that means something internal has torn loose. Other nights, there's only breathing, and some nights, even that stops. When someone dies, they're dragged to the surface at shift change. Sometimes. Other times, the body is left to rot in a disused shaft, until the smell gets too strong to ignore. Food is worse than what you got in the city, if that's even possible. You're given a scoop of grain boiled to paste once or twice a day, depending on how many bodies they have to feed. Water comes from a cracked cistern. It tastes like rust and the faint edge of mould. You drink anyway. You drink anything. No one talks much down here. Conversations are short, grunts, warnings, the occasional curse muttered through cracked lips. You don't ask names. You don't offer yours. It doesn't matter. You're not expected to live long enough to remember anyone, or be remembered yourself. The average life expectancy here is measured in months. A few strong ones make it a year. No one makes it further without permanent damage. There are stories, of course, of escape attempts, of slaves who faked illness, who bribed guards, who found a way out through an old shaft. But the stories always end the same way. Caught, crippled, killed, replaced. Even death doesn't get you out. You just leave a hole behind that someone else has shoved into. You lose track of time. There are no days, no nights, just shifts and shadows. Your muscles knot. Your hands bleed. You forget how to stand without hunching. The skin on your feet splits open. You dream about open air and sunlight, but the dreams fade quickly, replaced by more realistic ones. A dropped bucket, a falling rock, a guard's boot on your spine. You used to be a person. Now you're a tool, a pick that can scream, a mule that sometimes bleeds. You were sent here because you had nothing left to take, because your death wouldn't inconvenience anyone important, and because Rome has more stone to pull from the earth than it has sympathy to spare. This isn't labour. This isn't survival. This is a death sentence with extra steps, and you're already halfway through it. You didn't expect to be pulled out of the mines. No one ever is. But one day, without warning, you're yanked from the dark like an old tool being repurposed. Maybe a mine supervisor owed someone a favour. Maybe your former master needed extra hands in the city. Or maybe you were just the least broken body on the replacement list. Either way, you're loaded onto a cart, ribs still aching, and dragged back to sunlight you can't look at without blinking. Back to Rome, back to work that doesn't kill you quite as fast, but still kills you all the same. And that's when you start to hear the name, Spartacus. It travels in whispers, passed from one chained mouth to another. It sounds like thunder wrapped in cloth, too dangerous to say out loud, but too tempting to keep buried. They say he was a gladiator, that he broke free, that he gathered tens of thousands and marched against Rome itself. For a moment, something stirs inside you, something sharp, unwelcome, and nearly extinct. Hope. It doesn't last, because you're not Spartacus, you're not a trained fighter, you've never touched a sword that wasn't pointed at you. You're half-starved, half-limping, and wholly unarmed. You don't know strategy, you don't have followers, you have a mop, a bruised shoulder, and a set of knees that creak when you crouch. And even if you did somehow manage to raise a hand in defiance, to gather others, to escape, you've seen the road to Rome. You know what lines it. Crosses. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, every mile down the Appian Way. Slaves nailed up like grotesque milestones, one after the other, left to rot, to be mocked, to be forgotten. That's what Rome does to rebels. Not just defeat, demonstration, a warning carved in flesh. That's what awaits those who believe freedom is something they can simply reach out and take. Still, the whispers spread. In the kitchens, in the gardens, in the dim back corridors of bathhouses, men speak of fighting back, of rising up, of breaking chains and taking what was denied. You don't argue, you don't scoff, you just listen quietly while keeping your eyes on the floor. You've learned not to speak too boldly. Sometimes the person whispering next to you is a spy. Sometimes they're just reckless. Either way, people who talk too much tend to disappear. The idea is intoxicating though. Just for a moment, you allow yourself to imagine it. The chains off, the guards gone, a crowd of slaves moving together like a flood, washing over the villas and estates. You imagine what it would feel like to strike someone and not be punished, to speak your own name, to run without looking over your shoulder, to be more than silent labour. But the fantasy falls apart fast. You're too tired, too broken, and so is everyone around you. The rebellion, if it ever comes, won't be led by men like you. It'll be led by the lucky few who still have something left to lose. The ones with strength in their arms and breath in their lungs. The ones who haven't yet learned what it means to survive by becoming smaller than yourself. You envy them a little. Not because you think they'll succeed, but because they still believe they can. Even if a revolt did succeed, what then? Rome is everywhere. It has armies, fleets, roads, governors, gods. It has an entire language, built around ownership and punishment. You could take a villa, maybe a district, but how long before the legions return? How long before the stories end, the same way they always do, with someone hanging from a tree, while a Roman scribes a list of how many lashes it took? You've seen rebellion on a smaller scale. A man refusing to rise when ordered. A woman spitting at her master. A boy who ran and made it halfway to the forest before they loosed the dogs. You remember how it ended for each of them. The broken jaw, the burned back, the corpse dragged behind a cart. There are no martyrs here, just warnings, just examples. The system doesn't fear individuals. It doesn't need to. It's built to endure defiance. One slave dies, another steps in. You're not a person, not really. You're a function, a unit of labour, a replaceable cog in a machine that runs on blood and silence. That's why rebellion doesn't work. Not because it's impossible, but because it's irrelevant. Even Spartacus died. Even he was crushed, erased, and left hanging from a wooden cross like the rest. So you keep your head down. You sweep. You serve. You stay quiet. You let the dreams go cold again. Not because you've given up exactly, but because hope is expensive. And in your position, there's nothing left to spend. Sometimes, at night, when no one's around, you still whisper his name. Just once. Just to remember that someone fought back. Just to remember that there was a moment, however brief, when Rome trembled. But then you roll over, cough into your sleeve, and close your eyes. The dream fades with the morning. The guards shout. The work begins again. And the crosses wait silently on the horizon, patient as ever. At some point, you try to believe. Not because you're hopeful, but because you're empty. And belief fills space, at least for a while. You don't start with the grand temples. Those are for the citizens, the wealthy, the powerful. You start with whispers in the slave quarters. Small idols tucked into corners, scraps of cloth tied to rafters, names spoken in secret, like passwords. Isis, Mithras, Jesus. You don't know what they want or what they promise, but you hear that they listen, and you're desperate to be heard. You light a candle to Isis, with fingers that still shake from the morning's beating. You murmur her name, not in Egyptian, not properly, but in the garbled mix of tongues that passes for prayer in the slave quarters. You ask for peace, or strength, or for your master to drop dead choking on a date. You don't know which you mean more. You offer what little you have, a chipped bead, a torn thread, a whisper. You kneel, not out of reverence but out of habit. You're used to being lower than everything else. Mithras comes later. His cult is secretive, strange. The men speak of him in the dark, of loyalty, of brotherhood, of light carved out of darkness. You don't understand the rituals. Most aren't meant for you. But sometimes, someone lets you stay near the fire. You listen to the chants, the old stories about the bull and the cave and the blade. They talk about rebirth, about strength earned through suffering. You like the sound of that. It feels close to truth, even if the truth is ugly. Then there's Jesus. That name's newer, dangerous. The Romans don't like it, which, in your mind, makes it worth listening to. The stories are strange. A man born in a stable, executed like a thief, who rose from the dead and promised salvation to the lowest of the low. To people like you, the idea is intoxicating. A God who walks, who bleeds, who suffers. Not a marble statue in a temple, but a man nailed to wood, breathing dust and pain. Someone who knows what it means to be afraid. You start to pray more often. Not because it works, nothing changes, but because it gives your suffering shape. A container, something to scream into without making a sound. You mutter prayers while sweeping floors, while cleaning chamber pots, while scrubbing blood from cloth. You trace invisible symbols on your palm before meals. You thank gods who haven't helped you. You praise divinity with the same mouth that curses under your breath. Your master drags you by the hair one afternoon for forgetting to bow quickly enough. You cry out, you bleed a little, later you whisper to your God again. Ask why, ask if they saw, ask if they care. You don't get an answer, you never do. But you keep praying, because the silence is still better than nothing. Silence doesn't beat you, doesn't sell you, doesn't touch you at night with wine on its breath. Sometimes you wonder if the gods are watching and simply don't care. Maybe they're as cruel as the Romans, or maybe they don't exist at all. Maybe religion is just another layer of control, a way to keep slaves from biting back, a holy leash, a celestial carrot, a promise that if you just keep suffering long enough, something better will come. Not now, of course, later, always later. But even that lie has its uses. You see it in the eyes of other slaves, that flicker of something when they kneel, when they light their candles, when they sing their broken hymns. It's not joy, it's not peace, it's the bare minimum of hope. Enough to keep from collapsing, enough to lift a spoon or smile at a child or sit upright one more day. Sometimes, that's all a lie needs to do. You see a man whipped so hard his back splits open like wet parchment. That night, he prays louder than usual. You see a girl throw herself into her work with a quiet, fanatical energy, muttering praise under her breath like a charm. You see others fall away, one by one, abandoning the gods they once clung to. Some curse the heavens, others simply go still. You don't know which path is wiser. Eventually, your prayers get shorter, less poetic, less polite. You stop asking for salvation. You start asking for smaller things, fewer bruises, a shorter shift, a night without screams from the next room. You stop lighting candles, not because you've lost faith, but because wax is expensive and hope burns too fast. You still believe, maybe, a little, but now your God lives in the cracks, in the quiet, in the spaces between beatings. That's all you can afford. Religion, you realise, is like a warm rag pressed to a broken limb. It doesn't heal you. It doesn't stop the pain. But it helps you pretend you're not bleeding out. Just for a little while. They say if you work hard enough, you might be freed. That's what they tell you. It's repeated like gospel, whispered like a secret reward just out of reach. Obey. Endure. Keep your head down. And one day, your master might hand you a scrap of paper that changes everything. Freedom, they say. A fresh start. A new life. You've seen it happen once, maybe twice. A man in his 40s stooped from years in the vineyards, handed a wax tablet and told he could go, just like that. He cried, thanked the master, kissed his hand. Then he left the estate with nothing but a worn tunic and a name that still wasn't his. You heard he ended up back here 2 years later, begging to be taken in again. No one did. Freedom, as it turns out, is complicated. You don't just stop being a slave, you become a freedman, which sounds noble until you try living as one. You still carry the brand. You still speak with the wrong accent. You still flinch when someone raises their voice. Everyone knows what you were. They see it in the way you walk, the way you hesitate before sitting down, the way you smile too quickly when someone laughs. Some masters are more generous. They free slaves in their wills, usually after squeezing every bit of labour from them first. You might be 60 by then, your back twisted, your teeth gone, your hands curled into claws from years of grip and strain. Congratulations, you're free, just in time to die alone in a rented room behind the fish market. And you better hope you saved money. Being free doesn't mean anyone's feeding you. Rome makes it harder still. Freedmen can't hold certain offices, can't marry who they want, can't vote freely in all assemblies, can't walk into polite company without being reminded again and again that they don't belong. You're marked, not with iron anymore, but with memory. Everyone remembers, everyone reminds you. The senators chuckle, the merchants sneer. Even the slaves you left behind look at you like a traitor who escaped the fire but didn't put it out. Some freedmen do well, especially the ones who are house slaves to rich and powerful men. If you're smart, if you're lucky, if you keep serving your old master's family, you might earn enough to open a shop, a bakery, a stall in the market. You hang a sign. You polish your sandals. You try to pass for respectable. But someone always remembers the days when you slept beside the hearth like a dog. They never let you forget. You have no family name, not really. You take your former master's name, as if to say, I owe everything to him. Because in Rome, even your freedom is a gift you're expected to be grateful for. You're not your own man. You're a reflection of someone else's generosity, a walking advertisement for their mercy. And if you fail, if you stumble, it reflects badly on them. So they watch you, even after you leave. Some freedmen try to forget. They drink, gamble, pretend they were always free. But the body remembers. The knees that learn to kneel instinctively. The hands that fold themselves behind the back without thinking. The voice that drops in volume whenever someone important enters the room. You can't unlive what you survived. You can only drape a clean toga over it and pretend it's not still bleeding underneath. Others stay close to the estate, hovering on the edge of the household like ghosts. They offer to work for wages. They take the worst jobs, hauling, fetching, fixing. The masters like having them nearby. It makes them feel noble. See how generous I am, they say. I freed him, and he still wants to serve me. But what they don't say is that no one else would take him. That Rome doesn't welcome the newly freed. It barely tolerates them. You wonder sometimes what you would do with freedom, if it were real, if it meant more than a name and a paper and a life lived in the margins. Would you run? Change your clothes? Shave your head? Try to find your birthplace and see if anyone remembers you? Or would you keep sweeping floors and smiling for scraps, just without the whip at your back? You're not sure anymore. The truth is, manumission isn't an ending. It's a transfer from one kind of powerlessness to another, from slavery to suspicion, from obedience to performance. You stop being owned, but you never stop being watched. And the price of slipping up is exile, poverty, death, or worse, return. Because Rome has a rule: a freed slave who misbehaves can be re-enslaved. All it takes is an accusation, a debt, a scandal, one wrong word in front of the wrong man, and just like that, the illusion shatters. The papers burn, the name is stripped away, the chains return. So you keep your expectations low. You don't daydream about manumission anymore. You let the other slaves whisper about it in corners, eyes bright, hearts foolish. You just keep your head down and your tasks in order. If freedom ever comes, it will be quiet, late, and not nearly as free as they promised. It happens slowly, not all at once. First it's the stairs. You start limping up them instead of climbing. Then it's your grip. The bucket slips, the tray shakes, the broom falls more often than it used to. You try to hide it. You press your hands against the wall when no one's looking, trying to make them stop trembling. But the tremors always come back. Your joints ache in the morning, and worse at night. Your breath runs short. You start coughing and don't fully stop. No one says anything at first, but they notice. You're slower to respond, slower to move. You kneel more carefully, with both hands bracing you like scaffolding. You try not to grunt when you rise, but the sound slips out anyway. Your teeth are going, one by one, loosening and vanishing. Your back bends forward, your shoulders curving into a shape that makes you look smaller than you are. Age has a way of folding you up, piece by piece, until there's not much left that resembles the person you used to be. You're not profitable anymore. That's the word they use. Not sick, not tired, just unprofitable. As if your body is a tool that dulled too fast. You still try, of course. You sweep slower but longer. You carry lighter loads but more trips. You smile too much, hoping it makes you look cooperative. But it doesn't. It makes you look desperate. And no one likes a desperate slave. Eventually, they reduce your duties. Not out of kindness, out of calculation. You're not worth the risk of injury. A broken hip costs more than you're worth. So they send you to smaller tasks, minding the door, feeding chickens, folding linens, things they don't trust children to do, but that don't require strength. You sit more often, you watch more. You listen to the younger slaves talk about problems you haven't had in years. Blisters, sore shoulders, first loves, secret pregnancies. You nod when they speak to you, but you don't join in. You remember when you used to have things to say. Now you don't see the point. They feed you less, just slightly, enough that it takes a while to notice. The crust is smaller, the stew thinner. You don't complain. Complaining is for the young. You eat what you're given and lie down when the work is done. You're cold more often than you used to be. You start saving bits of cloth to wrap around your knees. When the wind cuts through the cracks in the servant quarters, you tuck your chin into your collar and pretend you're asleep so they don't ask you to move. Sometimes they talk about selling you. You hear it mentioned, casually, over wine. We should send that one to the countryside. Maybe someone will buy him cheap. You're not shocked. You've been sold before. You know what it sounds like. You know what it feels like to stand on an auction block and have someone lift your lip to check your teeth. This time, there won't be any teeth to inspect. Just gums and scars and a tired look you can't quite blink away anymore. If they do sell you, it'll be to someone even poorer. A farm owner short on hands. A widow with land but no labour. You'll be sent to patch roofs or dig ditches until your back gives out entirely. If they don't sell you, they'll just wait. That's what happens to old slaves. You're put aside like a cracked pot left on a shelf to gather dust until you stop moving. No pension, no ceremony, no peace, just the long wait for death. You think about it more now. Death, not in a dramatic way, just as a conclusion, an end point, a slow fading. You wonder whether anyone will notice when it happens, whether you'll be found curled in your blanket or face down in the dirt with half a meal still in your gut, whether the younger slaves will pause or just step around you and keep working. You hope for silence. You hope they don't try to wake you. No one teaches slaves how to age. You learn on your own. How to walk without limping too obviously, how to mask your wheezing, how to hide your shaking hands when guests are nearby. You teach yourself not to hope for too much, not for comfort, not for warmth, not for recognition. You don't expect dignity. You gave that up decades ago. Now you'd settle for stillness. You used to have dreams, not the kind you sleep through, the kind that keep you alive. You dreamed of manumission, of escape, of standing in the sun without chains. Those dreams are gone now. They were too heavy to carry this far. You let them go one by one like teeth. Now you dream of simple things, an easy breath, a dry place to lie down, a night without pain in your spine. You dream of not waking up. Not because you're suicidal, that would imply choice. This is something else, something slower, quieter, simpler. You're old now, broken, spent. You're no longer a tool, just the ghost of one. A shadow trailing behind a life you never chose. One morning you wake up slower than usual, aching in places you didn't know could hurt, and your breath feels like it's being pushed through a wet cloth. You try to stand, but your legs don't respond the way they used to, so you sit back down and wait for the feeling to pass. It doesn't. You're still breathing, so they still expect you to work. You shuffle through your chores, slower, softer. You drop a cloth and it takes you 3 tries to bend down far enough to pick it up. Someone watches you, maybe a younger slave, maybe not. They don't say anything. They don't need to. You've become part of the background, an object that still moves but not enough to draw attention. By evening you're cold in a way that doesn't make sense. The fire is lit, but your fingers are numb. You eat slowly, spilling half of it down your tunic. You try to clean it off, but your hands just smear it around. You go to lie down early, hoping sleep will sort things out. Your body doesn't feel like yours anymore. It's heavier than you remember, stiff, quiet in the wrong ways. You don't wake up. Someone finds you the next morning, curled under a blanket, your chest still and sunken, your mouth half open, your face blank. You'd hoped it would be quiet and it was. No fear, no panic. Just a long pause that turned into forever. No one screams, no one weeps, they just nod. Maybe mutter something like, figures or he was old. Then they move on. There is no funeral, no marker, no speech. Your name, Whatever was left of it is not spoken aloud. No one pours wine in your honour or burns incense on your behalf. You are not laid gently in the earth. You are dragged, wrapped in a soiled cloth, carried out past the edge of the estate. Your body is dropped into a pit alongside others, a heap of limbs and torsos and indistinguishable faces. No one knows how many are buried there. No one counts. It's not worth tracking. The pit has been filled and redug many times over. You are now part of the soil, or you will be soon enough. When the rains come, the earth will shift and the bones will mix. No one will ever be able to say which ones were yours. Back at the villa, your chores are reassigned by noon. Someone younger is sweeping your old corner. Someone stronger is carrying buckets you used to struggle with. They don't miss you. They didn't know you. And even if they did, they learned long ago not to care too much. Attachment is dangerous. Mourning is wasteful. Rome does not grieve its machines. Your master eats lunch on schedule. Fish, olives, a loaf of bread. He does not mention you. You were never a person to him, just a tool that stopped working. He might not even realise you're dead. You are old and quiet, and the help rotates often. You were easy to forget while living. Now you're even easier. Rome, of course, goes on. The streets are busy. The senators argue. The markets overflow. In the temples, priests raise their arms to the sky and ask the gods for protection, wealth, peace, never for justice. In another district, a trader buys 3 new slaves. One of them stares too long at the ground, not yet used to the weight of a collar. One of them cries, one is quiet. Somewhere another free person is being shackled. Maybe they were captured in a war. Maybe they were sold by a desperate parent. Maybe they were born into it and didn't even know they had a choice to lose. It doesn't matter. They will be marched, branded, trained. They will be beaten, used, exhausted. They will clean floors, carry water, bury the dead. They will take your place. You are not remembered. You are not mourned, but you are replaced. That's how Rome works. It eats, it chews, it swallows, and when it's finished, it reaches for more. You are never more than a mouthful. A few years of service, a few pounds of flesh. You built the walls, served the meals, bled into the soil, and when your body gave out, you were cast aside. Not cruelly, not kindly, just efficiently. No monument will rise over your grave. No inscription will carry your name. No prayer will lift your spirit. But the empire you served will endure, for now. And somewhere in its endless, greedy belly, your bones will lie forgotten. Just one more life devoured in silence. That brings us to the end of tonight's story. Not with justice, not with freedom, but with the same cold silence that swallowed so many before. If you're still awake, thank you for listening to a life that left no name behind, only labour and ash. History doesn't always end in triumph. Sometimes it ends in a ditch unmarked, while the world keeps eating. If you'd like early access to more of these historical bedtime stories, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find a link to the Patreon in the description. You can also like, subscribe, or leave a comment with other parts of history you'd like to see covered. And if you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps others find these stories. Sleep well.